Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 225. We're recording this live on November 11th, 2021. I'm your host, Nick Roome. I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Good morning. How the devil are you?
I am devilishly good, Barry. Thank you again for moonlighting with us.
Yes.
We got a great show for you tonight. We're actually going to be talking about man versus machine and who to trust when you go to the doctor's office. And later, we're going to answer some questions from the community about what to do when recruiters are weird. What do you want to see from a start menu? And the most important questions when hiring a UX designer and or researcher. But first, we have some programming notes here. We're excited to announce that our coverage of ErgoX is started. The preview's out now, so we've done a preview of ErgoX. We had some scheduling conflicts during the conference itself, so we'll have to wait for that 30-day window before we can actually see the talks. But if anyone went to ErgoX and wants to leave us a voicemail about your experience, please do drop us a line. You can go to our website and click the little voicemail in the bottom right-hand corner. And in other news, we have joined Team C's. So if you are unfamiliar, Team C's is an effort across many different content creators with the goal of removing 30 million pounds of trash by January 1st, 2022 from the ocean. So they're basically, they've equated $1 of donations to 1 pound of trash removed from the sea. And this is started by Mark Rober and Mr. Beast. We are now part of Team C's, and to kind of make sure that this effort does not go unnoticed, we here at Human Factors Cast are going to be producing 8 standalone Human Factors minutes available for everybody. So this is also available in your feed now. You've heard the first one this week. It was about what Team C's is and what our plans for Team C's are, kind of what I just told you, but you can listen to it now. We have 8 episodes coming out through the end of this year, and like I said, that's free to everyone. Normally, our Human Factors minutes are for our patrons, but this is too big of an effort to just keep to that small pool. So go check it out, teamcs.org. And I think we'll leave it there. Let's go ahead and get into we know what you're here for. You're here for the news. That's right. This is the part of the show about Human Factors news. Barry, what's the story for us this week?
So this week we're looking at whether doctors should rely less on mental shortcuts when deciding patient care. So algorithms and analytics are now commonly used by professional sports, in sales forecasts, lending decisions, and car insurance providers. But researchers are suggesting that it's time for doctors to stop relying on their use of heuristics when making decisions about patient care with limited cognitive resources. So heuristics are the mental shortcuts that we're talking about. Using electronic health records more than 86,000 infant deliveries, they found that delivering physicians were influenced not only by the indications of the current patient, so the one that they're currently working with, but also the outcome of their most recent delivery. So they're not suggesting that physicians use these mental the physicians use these mental shortcuts lack expertise or training, but the research demonstrated it's a common tendency even through amongst more experienced doctors. They've offered several suggestions, including the use of artificial intelligent decision support systems to help physicians overcome their reliance on maladaptive heuristic or their own decision rules. So, Nick, are you convinced? Should doctors give up their gut feel for AI?
Yeah, I think so. It makes sense to me. Doctors are humans. Humans make mistakes. AI has progressed over the years by a lot. And I do think the future of healthcare is artificial intelligence. I really do. I think there's that happy medium of having sort of the doctor play a supervisory role when it comes to artificial intelligence, and that's kind of the future where the system can look at sort of hundreds of thousands of data sets and determine what's best for the patient. And as long as nothing's fishy, the doctor goes, all right, yep, good, let's do it. And they can kind of use their expertise to judge that fishiness, right? Anyway, what are you thinking about this article?
My gut feel is to go along with what you said, but I'd also then maybe play devil's advocate with that, because whilst AI is the future, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. Is it there yet? Is it actually truly thinking in a way that can actually do diagnosis in a way that that humans can? Humans make mistakes, that's true, but actually the way that the human brain works is still way more powerful in the way that it dives into problem solving and being able to pull together abstract pieces of information. I mean, one of the quotes out of the article when you read is most of the time the heuristics do save time and resources, and they produce pretty good outcomes. But in some situations, pretty good is not good enough. So even then, they're sort of admitting that the way that humans do things does work most of the time. Um, but then I've coincidentally I was watching a couple of episodes of House this morning. And I don't know if anybody watches House, but that is looking at a group of people who are doing basically advanced diagnostics and diving into really weird problems that are not standard, and so they're having to use all sorts of their own cognitive abilities to solve the problems, or at least according to the script writers, they do. But that's kind of the thing is the that level of diagnosis and having to do the investigation real, and would an AI be able to do that in its current form today? My gut feel is that no, it wouldn't. We just don't know enough. But that's not to say we're not terribly far away from the future. Um, and then my only last thought is doing that checklist. Is it going to have an impact into people's times? Into people's life in the time that it takes to go through a checklist. Where if we have the heuristics and we recognize what we're looking at and just dive straight to it, which checklisting doesn't really allow you to do. So I don't know. I'm going to sit on the fence, as painful as it could be, and say that yes, we could do it, but we're not there yet. But I think this is a good point to maybe us dive into some of the HF principles around it. So should we dive into some of that?
Yeah, I think let's start with maybe heuristics in healthcare, and then get into sort of the algorithms piece of healthcare. So let's take it from the psychology side of things, and they mentioned these mental shortcuts; those are heuristics, and there's some research that suggests that some of the most common decisional shortcuts that are used in medicine, to the field of medicine overall, are availability, anchoring, and confirmatory heuristics, where representativeness, overconfidence, and bandwagon effects are also prevalent in medical practice. So we're looking at, I just listed off a whole bunch of names there. We'll go through them one by one and talk about them. But those are typically the most common in medicine and medical. So do we want to talk through these heuristics, or I guess mental shortcuts, one by one, Barry?
Yeah, we can do. I mean, if I'll kick it off with the availability heuristic. So it's the I guess best way to describe it. It's the decision based on things that you already know, things that are familiar to you, things that lend themselves to what to your current knowledge, and therefore whatever you're seeing fits with your model. And so because that information is available to you, then you'll automatically jump to it.
Yeah. So then we have anchoring, which is kind of latching onto that first thing that you hear or understand, that first piece of information, right? So, in a way, I think this article is almost um, suggesting that anchoring is happening with the most previous delivery, at least in this case. They're kind of using that as an example, and we can talk about that when we get to more on the article discussion. But kind of taking that one piece and holding it as the most true when making a decision.
Yeah. You can also dive into confirmatory, so doing something and then whatever sort of action you're taking actually has an effect. So that's things are confirming what you think you already know, and whether it might not be right, but because it keeps on confirming your initial thoughts, then you're going to anchor yourself into that a lot more, because it keeps on giving you that confidence that what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah, and then you have the representativeness heuristic. This is kind of looking at an event and comparing it to what already exists out there, and basically thinking, or using that mental shortcut to think that what is true in one case is representative of many cases. And again, this is kind of with that previous delivery. You might go, okay, they had a cesarean. It might be true that a cesarean is a better um, sort of method of birth in this case, because it was, I used it last time, therefore it might be good this time. It's kind of representative of the sample of that doctor. I think I did an okay job describing that one.
I'd
It's
say
basically
when you
estimating probabilities.
I'd say when you're digging into these, it's not as easy as you think
Yeah.
when you plug it out. Maybe my overconfidence in my judgment of being able to deliver this is far outweighs the accuracy in the way I'm describing these, and that is a great example of overconfidence. Basically, overconfidence is you have more confidence in your own judgment than actually the accuracy in what of what you're actually delivering, or the accuracy of your judgment itself. So you're basically just being too mouthy about it.
Yeah, and then last up here we have the bandwagon heuristic or bandwagon effect. This is, if everyone's doing it, then it must be right. Everyone, we talked about crypto in the pre-show. Everyone's investing in crypto. It must be right.
Mhm.
So that can happen in medicine too. So, one example would be if there's a procedure that has worked in several cases as kind of a breakthrough procedure, it might be that everyone sees that as the new big thing, and maybe there's some additional study that needs to happen before that is in fact the status quo, basically jumping on because everyone else is doing it. So I think that's a pretty good overview of some of these heuristics that we're talking about in the healthcare field, and I think just overall heuristics are mostly positive, but again, kind of it depends factor, right? It can have sort of these negative consequences if it's not being used correctly, right? We've talked about them a little bit in a negative light here, in the sense that that they're almost biases
Mhm.
in this case, but I think in a lot of cases it actually does end up affecting patient care positively. The fact that they have these mental shortcuts that they can take to get to where the patient needs to be can often, it is a shortcut. They're taking that step to cut not cut corners. That sounds negative, but it is it's the speed accuracy trade off that we're talking about here. How quickly do you get patients care? Depends on the speed by which you can diagnose those problems, and so they are using these mental shortcuts to cut through some of that um, that process noise.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right there, because I think again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, in that particularly general practitioners or people who are in, say, the emergency rooms and things like that, have to make really quick decisions really quickly based on fundamentally their own experience and their education. So as soon as they see something that looks like something else that they've had experience of, so it's maybe based on something familiar, so leaning on that availability or anything like that, 99% of the time that's going to take you down the right route, to be able to save lives, because that's what that's their game, isn't it? um the bandwagon effect again is really, I think, probably quite strong and quite well used, because 99% of the time it'll be the right thing to do. I think the point in the article is perhaps saying the the it's 99% of the time isn't as good as 100% of the time. So it is that
Right.
piece of trade-off. So I think there's an element here of just how are algorithms used in healthcare, and how is AI going to get in there. So is it worth diving into some of that, do you think?
It is. I do want to just wrap up the heuristics bit, right? I mean, we
Oh,
do talk.
the four bullet points that I've completely missed.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
let's do that.
Well, I do want to just wrap it up and say,
Yeah.
that there's this huge it depends factor, right? There's the the personality, the level of expertise and experience that a doctor has that might influence their decisions. It also is influenced by context and conditions of the situation that they're in. And I think all this is important to remember as they're taking into account some of these heuristics. They're looking at these situations through the lens of all this context. And that's something that I think is going to be important to capture when you're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? And so those are kind of some mitigating factors that we can use to reduce the likelihood of some of these algorithms or heuristics um, in the doctor's heads being used incorrectly. So yes, let's talk about algorithms and machine learning. Why don't you jump into it? Because you brought us a great reference here.
Well, I do like to earn the money, the vast amount of pay you give me for coming and doing these international engagements. Yes, no, I was actually really lucky enough, and it's really nicely coincidental that I led a webinar, chaired a webinar last week with the Chat Institute of Economics and Human Factors, and they produced a white paper. And it happens to be from a special interest group that I'm a member of. So see, I'm just ultimately qualified to be talking about this, except for the fact I've been bringing in actually a lot of the HF side rather than the AI side. But there's the use of artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is which is what worries me at the moment, is such a catch-all term, because there's many different types now of things that come under artificial intelligence. So things like machine learning and things like that. And a new field, which I think, well, it's not that new, but it's being talked about more and more, is artificial general intelligence. So it's worth defining the difference between the two. So artificial intelligence is very specific. It's applied in a very specific subcase, whereas the artificial general intelligence is something that you should be able to engage with and just almost talk normally, give it a whole lot of random facts, and it come out with the right sort of answers. So it can be used in the general case, which for healthcare I think is really exciting, because that is the equivalent of your emergency doctor being given anything and being able to take in all that information. So there's currently seen as three approaches in the three different types of AI algorithms that are used at the moment. And so if we dip into them, so if I hit the first one, which is basically supervised learning, which is where the data is all sorted and organized before being presented to the algorithm, and the algorithm is there to minimize error. So we training the AI to do its to do its thing, and to reduce the differences between its own outputs and what is perceived to be the correct output. Do you want to jump into unsupervised learning?
Yeah, so unsupervised learning is basically where it independently discovers the patterns in the data by itself. And this is the scary one to me, because it just kind of results in it's like, how did you figure that out? It just kind of looks through the data and finds a thing. So yeah, we're talking about how these different approaches are kind of used in these algorithms for the purpose of thinking about how we feed it data from the healthcare side of things, right? So when you have that supervised learning, you have sort of these training sets that doctors will go in and kind of assign and make sure that all the parameters are there. Where unsupervised learning is, hey, we've detected that this patient has a heart disease and we don't know why, but it's there. And then you have the last one here, which is reinforcement learning, and this is basically using a reward function, right? So it's given that input data, and then the output is measured according to that the success of that output, right? And so that's kind of, in simple terms, the three different approaches. And so when we're talking about AI and algorithms in this context, I think we're mainly, or at least I like to think about this in terms of like a decision support system. I think that is what I think of when we think about algorithms in healthcare. We can certainly have these algorithms, especially the unsupervised learning ones, those are just crazy to me, where it'll come back with a diagnosis and the doctor goes, oh, yep, that's right. How did you I didn't even and it's kind of shocking to everybody, but the doctor then ultimately makes the call, but that algorithm helped them get there. And so I don't know, do you want to talk about anything else with the differences in algorithms and how they impact how healthcare?
Yeah, so there's sort of one bit that came up. So when I went back to my original degree, actually, there was we sort of studied artificial intelligence at that point, and this is going back quite a few years now. But one of the cases that was leading at the time, there was our lecturer was she was one of the leading in the artificial intelligence realm at that time, and she was working in healthcare, and it was on lower back pain, and she was developing algorithms to diagnose lower back pain, and that was all great. But actually, she basically related to us the initial bit of research went through, and it basically came out that a lot of the times that she was her algorithms were diagnosing lower back pain, other doctors were going, no, that's not lower back pain, that's something else, that's etc etc. When it all then got referred, then actually it turns out that her algorithm was right all of the time, and it was the doctors that were wrong. So when you look at the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning for AI, this has been something in healthcare that's really important. That stuff that has been labeled and organized and saying this is what the outcome is, if it's in diagnosis, it's not necessarily right. So we need to be quite careful about how we're teaching our AIs to do things, because there's still so much about healthcare that we just don't know. So it's such an interesting topic to be nailing at the moment because of exactly that reason.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of the issues in healthcare from the artificial intelligence perspective, right? This is also coming out of that white paper that you shared with us, and we'll put a link to that white paper in the show notes too, so everyone can go check it out. But there's a nice graphic on there that kind of outlines all the different issues, and we pulled out a couple of them here. So automation bias. Let's just talk about them one by one. So automation
Mhm.
bias is an issue, right? Where you have this over reliance on sort of these aids and decision systems, and it's kind of the human tendency to take the path the road of least cognitive effort, right? So you're basically looking at these results and going, "Yep, that's right," instead of
Yeah.
critically thinking about whether or not that is in fact the correct outcome, or kind of what went into that decision, right? We got to carefully craft not only the output so that way the doctor understands how the system got there, but have them trained on the artificial intelligence system itself, so that way they know exactly what goes into it. And we'll talk about that with training too. But you want to
Yeah.
tackle this next one here?
Yeah, so explanation and trust is really understanding the output of the AI and have confidence in that decision. Because if we do have, and it almost goes back to that automation bias as well, that if the computer gives you an output and says it is this, then we're more likely to go, all right, then that's cool, and move on with it. But we need to have the ability to interrogate the AI, so it tells us why, and how it came to that decision, and the level of trust that it's got in the output. Because it's for us, we'll take it quite digitally and say, oh, it says this, therefore it's this. But if it's only got, say, a 50% confidence rating in it, then we need to understand that as well to be able to make that part of our judgment. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, so the next one here is human AI teaming. And this, in a nutshell, is just basically who handles what part and how graceful is the handoff between each of those parties, right? The human and the AI. And it might be that maybe the AI handles most of it and the human is just kind of there to deliver the news. That could be one model. You also have another model where the AI does part of it. It asks the doctor about a series of questions. They provide some input, and then it comes back with another output. And that would be kind of the handoff. So we got to think about how exactly the doctor is interacting with the AI in this case, and then we also have to think about sort of what parts the AI handles, what parts the human handles. That's kind of that whole human AI teaming aspect, just to make them gel together, right? It's like working with another human being everyone has their specialties. Where do you sort of focus effort on the system?
And that really leads into the next one, which is around training, because we've got to. This isn't just going to work on day one, and we've got to. Everyone will understand where everything goes. We've got to train and practice working with the AI. So the medical practitioners and the AI working well together, conducting their own exercises, conducting their own training, and almost experimentation as well, to understand where it's best employed, how to interpret the AI outputs. Is the AI output exactly what you need, and and how you interpret the confidence levels of what it gets to you. So it's that whole practice makes perfect piece, and it's really important, I think, with the understanding how to interact with that AI.
Yeah, so there's interaction with the AI, and then the next one here is, well, how does that AI and doctors, that relationship between staff and patients and AI, and whether or not, if an AI has more of a dominant role, does the doctor then do more work away from the patient? And how does that impact the patient's perception? How does that impact sort of the bedside manner? That whole thing is really important for for doctors. And so that relationship then changes when you introduce artificial intelligence into the mix, because that doctor then needs to communicate that back to the patient. They need to have some awareness of how that decision about their care was made. And so the doctor needs to be able to explain the AI. And so there's this really complicated relationship between the three. It's an interesting like triad, right? And then last up, you want to talk about this one? This one's fun.
Yeah, so this is something that actually, in the human factors perspective, we don't really get involved with very, very often, but it's the ethics side of things, because this is going to be absolutely critical to us making sure that it's successful. So there's a whole bunch of bits where ethics need to be considered. So firstly is in the design and the development of the AI itself, and there is already proven to be a identifiable bias in AI models, depending on who's been designing and programming them. So we need to make sure that them ethical issues are ironed out within these. The issues around privacy, so patient privacy, patient health, and making sure that people's records are nicely encapsulated. The autonomy of the practitioners, so who has the final say. If the AI comes out with a radically different output, how does that compare with what the doctor says or the practitioner says? Who wins? And fundamentally, it's all about understanding what the benefits are, but minimizing harm to patients. And so that whole ethical issue is providing a whole stream of research that has still got some way to go.
Yeah, and who's in the wrong if it's a misdiagnosis, right? If the
Yeah.
doctor's going off what the AI said, well, are the developers of the algorithm then at fault for malpractice because they it's a whole complicated thing. So let's get back to this article here, and we'll just kind of go over the research one more time. So they're looking at 86,000 cases records of infant deliveries, and these delivering physicians were again kind of influenced by the current patient, but then also what happened previously. And so one example that they use in this article here is that when a physician experienced a negative outcome with vaginal delivery, they're more likely to choose to deliver the next baby by cesarean and vice versa. So this whole we're having complications here, then the next one we're just going to go straight to C-section,
Yeah.
because it's that prior influence is then influencing their decision.
Yeah, and I think, but I think what is really quite neat about the paper is that they're acknowledging, or they're certainly saying that the profession need to acknowledge that this is a problem, but it's not the physician's fault. It's the way they've been trained. They're leaning on. They've got nothing else at the moment, and so they go with the best tools that they've got. But now with the advent of AI and other techniques, so it isn't just AI, but it's straight, just because we say algorithm doesn't necessarily mean it's artificial intelligence. It's just, there's other tools out there. We now have the ability not just to go simply with your gut decision anymore. We've got the ability to do it by other ways. Therefore, do we either need to start looking at doing it that way, or doing or pushing it a lot harder? So the sort of finish off with saying that, managers and other decision makers in business and elsewhere no longer simply go with their gut, but doctors often remain reluctant to introduce such information when making medical decisions for patients, which kind of makes sense given that it's it is their profession, and it's also their own personal insurance if it goes wrong.
Yeah, I think I don't know where we go from here. There's still a lot we don't know about AI and how it works. And really, all those human factors issues that we talked about in that white paper that you shared with us is really considerations we need to make or take before we implement this full blown. I think slowly dipping our feet into the waters here is probably the best way to go, and slowly changing over time versus this rapid implementation of all these new systems. But then it's also like, well, do you just, keeping with the medical analogies, do you yank the Band-Aid off and just jump deep, right in? I don't think that's the right approach personally, but I
Yeah,
don't know. Where do we go from here, Barry?
well, fundamentally now we're in a state of development and trust, because firstly the systems have got to be these AI systems have got to be developed in a way that they're trusted by practitioners, but they're also trusted by patients. And in the grand scheme of things, right now, and it goes back to what I said earlier around, we label everything, every sort of tool under this AI banner. If it goes wrong really soon, just because of the immaturity of it, we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, to keep in with that delivery analogy. See how we keep linking back? It's like professionalism. We're going to do that because people, as soon as some big mistakes happen, probably not through the fault of the AI, but it will actually go back to some other issues. We'll end up having everybody be just too scared to engage with it. And if a doctor was to turn around and say, "Oh, actually, I'm going to use this system, this AI system to help diagnose you," and it's already got bad press, then people are going to be against it regardless, just because we don't like technology. So I think it's a watching brief. I think we've got to tread carefully in the evolution, and the design for it, and we a softly approach. But you put it out there onto
Yeah.
Twitter. What do other people think?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, let's hear from everyone else. So we asked the question for tonight's social thoughts. Tonight's episode is all about doctors, algorithms, and analytics. Our social thought for this week: who would you rather diagnose your medical issues? An AI with access to hundreds of thousands of patient profiles, or a doctor with years of experience? And Barry, you won't believe this, but out of all the votes, we had 100% as AI.
What I've got to say, that's surprising.
It is surprising, but at the same time, you got to consider our audience. I think we have an audience that kind of knows
That's
what's up
that's
in the field, or at least
that's
can infer.
yeah, that's probably true. Or maybe have way more confidence in AI than we just profess that we do. So,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you: would you rather an AI or a doctor?
depends what it was.
You did the. It depends. All right.
No, I did a sort of half version of it depends. I think if I was going, if it was something that I was going in for that wasn't, it was kind of run of the mill stuff and it needs sort of confirmatory and all that sort of thing. I think I could sort of see an AI being useful there because it would do that. Maybe if I had something really serious, like maybe wrong with my brain or something like that, which some people say is there already, then maybe the AI is the good thing there, because you want it to pull in and pull in all the facts. So actually, that in both cases, yeah, I probably would go with the AI. That's interesting. I didn't think I would go there. I've
Well,
just
there you
talked
go.
myself into it.
I think I'd go with AI too, because like I said, it's scary how much AI can come up with something based on what it does, and we don't know how it gets there. I do want to bring up one comment here. This is from Katie Jerwicks. I hope I'm saying that correctly. They say, I'd actually choose option 3, a healthcare provider who uses assistive automation to support diagnosis. So there's the answer for the night. Should we trust computers over our doctor's expertise? Barry and I say yes, but I think ultimately it'll come down to sort of a mix of both, and who handles what, that's still to be determined. But that's the answer for tonight, folks. Any closing thoughts on this one, Barry?
Yeah, I'm with Katie. Katie's right.
Yeah, Katie's right. All right. Thank you to our patrons this week for selecting our topic, and thank you to our friends over at Kelly School of Business at Indiana University for our news story this week. If you want to follow along, you can join me on Office Hours every Monday, where I find these news stories. We do post the links to the original articles on our weekly roundups on our blog, or you can join us in our Slack or Discord for more discussion on these articles. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with some things around the human factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, huge thank you, as always, to our patrons. We're always happy to have you here. Especially want to thank our honorary Human Factors Cast staff patron, Michelle Tripp. Patrons like you keep the show running. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Now, this is where I usually plug more about Patreon, but I've been told by our treasurer that we are putting all of our eggs in one basket with Patreon. So I'm going to promote the merch store. Did you know that we have a merch store? Some neat designs over there that include It Depends shirt, show logo, like on the hoodie I'm wearing tonight. Other cool designs based in human factors culture. Want to support the show and look good doing it? Go to humanfactorscast.media/p/store.
Elegantly done. I thought
Did I
you did
sell it? Did I?
You did, but though you need to stand up and show the shirt off, show the hoodie off, because
Yeah, here you go.
I have merch envy.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's a very comfortable hoodie, and I don't like doing all this self promotion, but dude, this is a really comfortable hoodie. We've partnered with Spreadshirt, and their clothes are actually quite comfortable, and I do enjoy wearing the merch because of that reason.
Cool.
So we had a merch provider in the past that wasn't too great comfort wise.
Right, I see.
All right. Anyway, enough of that. Let's go ahead and switch gears and get into this next part of the show we like to call.
It came from.
That's right. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. This week it's Reddit. If you find these answers useful, give us a like wherever you're at to help other people find this content. So we have 3 of them up tonight. We have, let's just tackle them one by one here. This first one here is, what do you think are some of the most important questions when hiring a UX designer and or researcher? This is by OatmealNinja on the user experience subreddit. They go on to write, also, do you think that a researcher position should be separate from a designer? It's been in my experience that I've hired designers or researchers who are prima donnas and tend to get emotionally attached to their work, so they cannot make objective decisions. Barry, let's talk about this.
OatmealNinja, I think we need to have a chat. So I'll pick out some of these to begin with. Should the researcher be separate from a designer? To be honest, it depends on the size of the project you're doing, and in my experience, I've tended to pull both together. I could be doing researching one day, I could be doing designing the next. If the project is big enough, you can separate them out. Even then, I don't know whether there's a vast amount of benefit from doing that, because most people will be able to do both roles. But I mean, God forbid that you get emotionally attached to your work and you get really bought into the topic that you're doing. I mean, that's just a drama waiting to happen, isn't it? Of course you do that. Everyone does that. If you're not doing that, then I suggest you're not doing your job properly in the first place. So, OatmealNinja, I think you need to go and take a long, hard look at yourself, and look at people who are actually getting motivated by the work. If you're not getting emotionally attached, I'd be more worried. Sorry, that made me slightly angry.
Wow, you're really going hard on OatmealNinja here. Let's talk about this. So, I think OatmealNinja's problem here is that they see this emotional attachment as not being able to make objective decisions about their work. And yeah, I get that, but I mean, at the same time, if they're good at their job, they'll know. It's one thing to be. I think the confusion here is passion versus emotional attachment, because you can have passion and look at something with sort of this critical eye still, right? In fact, I do it with the podcast all the time. I have an attachment to this podcast. I love this podcast, but I still look at it a critical eye and go, okay, maybe the story that night wasn't so great. Or, okay, we could have pulled in some extra stuff here to supplement that. Yeah, I do it in my work too. I'm passionate about it. It doesn't mean that I can't think about it critically. And in fact, I would argue that the people who think critically about it love it more because they want to just make it the best thing that they can be. And those who are attached to the way things are just in love with the way things are now and don't really want it to be better. They're just kind of accepting the status quo. Anyway, my advice here: what do you think are some of the most important questions when hiring a UX designer or researcher, in terms of making sure that they can do the job correctly? I think, kind of understanding what their process is. I think that is the biggest sort of question that you can ask them, is what is your process? Because if you can get into their head, if you can understand their thought process about how to approach a decision, or how to approach research, how to approach a design, what steps they go through to modify that research or design, how they interact with users, how they interact with developers, how they interact with people on the team, I think those are some of the most important questions that you can ask. A lot of times I find that some of the stuff that we do in the day-to-day kind of changes. And we talked about this last week, right? Our day-to-day changes quite frequently. It's just a matter of what tools we're using at that time. Process can be relatively the same overall, but again, it just kind of depends on who we're talking to, who we're interfacing with. But that part of it is so critically important that when you're trying to bring someone else on the team, you want to make sure that they can gel with the way that things are done in your organization, and that they can gel with you if you were a hiring manager. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. Any last notes?
Yeah, I think the maybe get some examples of stuff they've done before, if that's possible. Not always possible, but yeah, that the whole gelling into your team, just because they work well on another team doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work well on yours, because you have a different dynamic. Every dynamic's different, and yeah, don't be necessarily hung up if their processes don't align to what you already know either, because if they're quite successful, they might just have a different way of doing things. That's also quite good fun.
All right, let's get into this next one here. Recruiters like you don't have enough experience, but let's keep in touch and connect in a couple of years. This is by Throwaway Person 222 on the User Experience subreddit. And they go on to write, so you want to reject me right now, gain experience at a place who will give me a chance, then come back to you when I suddenly gain more experience? Make it make sense. Recruiters don't know how ridiculous they sound sometimes. Barry, have you encountered this situation where let's just talk about this from the perspective of ridiculous demands from either somebody who's hiring or a recruiter? Have you experienced this?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it's an out of order thing, especially in the human factors world, because we are such a small domain, really. But there are more people coming in, and if recruiters are looking at you and say, well, actually, for the position I'm looking at the moment, because they're going to be looking at multiple positions a lot of the time. So you might not have the right experience for the position they're looking at trying to fill right now. But if they want to keep you on their books for the future, if something else more useful comes up, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. On the receiving end of it, it's frustrating because you are sitting there going, well, actually, I've got skills, I've got ideas, I've got all this sort of stuff. Yes, I might not have the experience. Just why should if you think I'm good enough to give me a shot at it. But it's also some of the so recruiters aren't HR practitioners. They're not the teams. They do have a fairly standard process that they go through to get people on board. So as much as I absolutely agree, it's frustrating and it's hard to hear. I don't necessarily think it's the recruiter's fault. I think it's unfortunately just business, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've definitely seen the advertisements where they're like, okay, we want someone to work for us for $20 an hour and have 10 years of experience and also know how every single language of coding and also know how to do research effectively and also know every design program. I've seen those, and those are absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
Kind of requirements for a job that I think do come down that, okay, we don't know what exactly we want this role to be. That's what that reads to me as. In this case here, where they're rejecting based on years of experience, I think from a recruiter standpoint, I mean, I guess I get it, but at the same time, it's not. It doesn't feel great from the person who doesn't have the experience. And to me, what this reads as is the person who reached out to you, their job is recruiting. And if they see you as somebody who fits another position that's similar to that, they don't want to burn the bridge with you. That's what I'm understanding. So if they're looking for somebody with slightly less experience, maybe instead of a senior role, you're looking for more of a junior role, then they want to keep in touch with you because you might be a good candidate for that position. I'm not saying that that's what's going on here. That's kind of just what it sounds like. Based on the verbiage that this person is using, reject is pretty harsh. So I'm wondering if maybe they applied to something and the recruiter screened them and that was seen as a rejection instead of a screening. I don't know. There's a subtle difference between the two, but I think it's an important distinction. So yeah, I get the frustration from this person, but at the same time, knowing how things work sometimes, I get it from the other perspective too. I don't know. It's not a very good answer, and I'm sorry for that. But I think, maybe don't burn bridges. That's my advice. Don't burn bridges. If they do have something for you later, they might reach out. Any other closing thoughts on that one, Barry?
Yeah, I guess I've been on that other side as well. I've been that person to say, you're just not the right fit for us right now. I really like you, but you're not there for the type of specific job I'm wanting done. You're just not. You don't have the experience that I think you'd be able to go and run with it. But I would love to keep in touch. So yeah, I've been there, and I don't think anybody's trying to be nasty, or at least I would hope they wouldn't want to be nasty, because at the end of the day, they're saying, we want to keep in touch with you. That's a good thing. There's clearly something they liked about your personality and generally you. They just want to have a bit more experience, because it's not necessarily time experience. It's just practical experience of being in the right sort of roles to have the right level of seniority to do things. It is just life, I think.
Yeah, it's rough. All right, let's get into this last one here. What changes do you want to see in your operating system? Barry, you picked this one. I'm really excited. This is by SexyYaya69 on the HCI subreddit. Did you pick it because of the username?
I love usernames in Reddit. I think they're just something else.
They go on to write, I'm taking a human-computer interaction course, and the first project is about creating a different start menu for operating systems and then testing and analyzing the results of this new build. Need some inspiration from you all. You can propose simple alterations or completely new innovations, such as creating it as a central pie menu or any other form you can imagine to improve the functionality and approachability of the start menus. Barry, now you picked this one for a reason, so I'll let you just go ahead and answer this one.
Well, I sort of picked it because I thought it was quite useful with the launch of Windows 11, and they've changed the start menu from being left-hand anchored on the lower bar to being central, which on the face of it, I can see that it's different. It gives it's a step change, but then I can also see from a design perspective, if it's all anchoring from the center, how is that going to look? How's your tabs going to splay out? That means you're going to have them splaying out from both sides and not moving from a left to right manner. It just starts triggering lots of things with my design antenna, sort of saying there's certain elements that I don't know how they're going to work. In terms of the actual question, what do I want to see on my start menu? I think if we wanted to be truly radical about it, well, why have the start menu at all? You only need it there when you are actually going to use it. So if we get more and more into touch screens, then actually you just want to touch them. You want it to disappear until you touch the screen and you start having a menu pop up there. I like the idea of having the pie menu. I've actually used that in some previous designs I've done fairly recently, where you touch and then you can start splaying out around it. But I think for me, it's about making sure that you have access to the core applications that you do have in a really dynamic way. So if you normally use Word and Excel and that sort of thing, that's what that's what comes up first, and then you can dive into that a bit more. But also having the documents that you've used in the maps really accessible really quickly. So I think having that level of dynamicism, but then also driving into some static would be really good. And in fact, we've had a comment on the from Tech Sergeant Chen, who says that's why they like Linux, multiple desktop environments. If you don't like what you have, use another one or make one of your own, which is kind of fair. If you're into the Linux side of things, then the world is your oyster in that sort of thing. The flip side is also true, though, that your ability to break your new oyster is also quite strong, because that's almost like the Apple Android argument as well.
Right. You got to know
Android
what you're
gives
doing.
and Android gives you a lot more flexibility, which I think we spoke about last week. Whereas Apple is very much you play by their rule book, which I think actually the Apple gives you a lot stronger usability in that respect, but less flexibility. So yes,
Yeah. This is a tough question for me to answer. So like, designing the dream start menu is interesting because I think what you said is why have one for truly radical, right? Why even have one? I think if a system can understand the context by which you are working in and understand the next step you need to take, that is ideal, because then it's just kind of doing things on its own. It's basically predicting your next move, and from there it will pull up the appropriate program or whatever it is that you need. I think when I think about it from my perspective here, I do think about sort of the approach where, especially in I don't know, I'm how games do like a start menu. They switch the mode on you. It's not something that pops up or overlays like Mac or Windows. It's something that changes your entire mode. You stop playing the game to go to the next thing that you're doing. And I think that for me works because it puts me out of this mode of I'm working and I'm picking the thing out that I need to do. And it's tricky to understand exactly what you need at that time, but I think context based I don't know, programs might help. Then there's also like your favorites. So I don't know. There's a couple ways to go about it, but I think the coolest thing to me is the predictive piece of knowing what is what's coming next in the workflow. If you're making a Google document, well, you might need to do research on a topic, and so you might need to go to a different tab and or pull up a PDF, and so it might know based on the content that you're writing what PDFs are relevant to that. based on the stuff in your desktop, and so it might just suggest those automatically, as an overlay. And I think that's kind of the dream, right? I do want to get to a couple of these comments here in the chat. Mads Dune says, I just love the synchronization of Mac and Apple. I know how to work a computer, but I don't have the time to delve deep into the topic and learn more, which is probably why I like the simplicity of Mac and Apple. And then Tech Sergeant Chin provides an alternative here. Alternatively, you can use different interfaces for specific uses, one for gaming, one for office work, etc. And I think that's kind of getting at that desktop perspective, right? Like having set desktops for certain modes, right? Like this is my gaming desktop with all my apps for gaming, and and I like that approach. I think that works. I haven't figured out how to get it working on Mac yet, but I know it exists. I do it for Windows, certainly. I have my podcast desktop.
I haven't implemented that yet, and I need to, because for exactly this. So I know the setup I like now for doing this podcast. I have the setup I like for doing my podcast, and I have the setup for everyday working and stuff like that. So yes, I need to play a bit more.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into this last part of the show. It's just one more thing. It's really where we just have an opportunity to talk about one more thing. Barry, what do you have up this week?
So this week has been so cool because I've actually been out in the field doing usability trials with real users, real kit in the open air, and actually just face-to-face stuff. It's been so nice to be able to do that. It's such a refreshing thing. And along with that, so when we did the podcast last week, I didn't get my usual sleep in because I was straight down to to deliver 2 lectures to human factors in aircraft maintenance. Again, that was all face-to-face stuff, when a lot of the lectures I've been given so far have all been remote. So I just go and do guest lectures. And so it was really nice to being able to see people and be able to react to them and engage with them. That was really cool. But the one more thing really that's really important, and I need your advice on, really, is, do you upgrade to Windows 11? Because it's come up on my desktop saying it's ready, it's downloaded. Click this button and your life will be revolutionized. But it just scares me. I don't know whether you should, because if it doesn't work, and because I have the setup with my my mixing desk and this, that, and the other. What happens if it doesn't work? You can't go back, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'm waiting. Mine is also ready to go, ready to install. I'm waiting on mine. I think my biggest hesitation is the same thing as you. There's a lot of settings that I have ready that I don't want to mess with, and I'm planning to do it when media outlets, like tech media outlets, say it's okay to do. There's some certain key features that I'm waiting for that aren't quite there yet, and then also it's a lot of setup when you upgrade, and hopefully they've streamlined a lot of that, but do it when you have some time. That's the big thing, right? So like maybe over the holidays, if you got like a week off or something, just take some time, update your system, and then slowly fix it over the week, where it's not going to be super pressing, right?
Yeah, I think for me it might have to wait until the new year. I think, unless we can do some unless we can do it. I mean, the laptop I've got is quite a decent one. It's relatively new. It's just got it this year, so it shouldn't have a problem in that respect. But it's like you say, it's the nuances behind it. So we shall see. It might be a long weekend job. So to upgrade it on the Friday and then fix it, like say on the Saturday and Sunday, and hope I can get it working again by the Monday.
There you go.
But enough about me. What about you?
My one more thing is a little thing called M Taylor. And this is this is going to sound like an advertisement. I swear it's not. I'm going to put an affiliate link in the show notes. You can help the show out, but this is not paid for by them. I just wanted to highlight it's a cool service, and it's one of the first times that something felt like magic. So, basically what M Taylor is you get naked in front of a camera, and you turn around. Yeah, hang on. You get naked in front of a camera, you turn around a couple times, and they send you clothes that fit your body perfectly. And they basically use the camera feed to use that to feed algorithms and AI that then come up with a bunch of different measurements, and then, you know, they cut out based on those measurements, and it feels like magic. It feels like magic because you put in this order, and then you know, like I'm a big guy, and so like finding clothes that fit me well and that I feel good in is hard. And so it's just it's amazing. You just get the clothes in the mail, and it just fits you. And if it doesn't, they do like they'll go and sort of do it again for free for you, which is really
Okay.
kind and a great business model. The clothes are a little pricey, but you know, I think for the comfort and for the convenience of having something custom fit to you is huge. Like I said, it sounds like an advertisement. I just was delighted by the experience, and I wanted to share it with you all. I will put the affiliate link down there. You can get 20% off. If you want that type of thing, by no means do you have to. Again, it's just helps the show, and not an advertisement, not paid for. I think with that's going to be it for today, everyone. If you like this episode, we invite you to check out another episode that we did, 223, on how artificial intelligence can improve learning. Comment wherever you're listening with what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Slack or Discord communities. You can visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. One, leave us a 5-star review. You can do that right now. Just go and leave us a 5-star review wherever you're watching, listening. 2, tell your friends about us. Word of mouth really helps the show grow. I can't tell you how many people said, I only found you because my friend mentioned they listened to your show. And 3, consider supporting us on Patreon if you have the financial means of doing so, or buy our merch. I don't know, do that because our treasurer says so. Anyway, as always, the links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. I want to thank Mr. Barry Kirby for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about algorithms?
For algorithms, then you need to find me on Twitter at Baz_K, or come and listen to me interviewing people on my podcast, 1202, the Human Factors Podcast, at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me streaming on Twitch every Monday from 4 to 5 Pacific for office hours, and across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
It depends.